technical difficulties. I would like to introduce myself. My name is Barbara Akoak. I identify legally on paper as an Iqaluit resident. I've been living in Iqaluit for 16 years. Before that, I spent 2 years in a town called Akviat. In this community, Akviat is actually where I started my Inuktut journey. This is the town there. This is the town where I was 14 years old, a complete Anglophone. My parents didn't teach me Inuktitut or Inuinnaq because the settings in our childhood, it started off in the NWT, and in the NWT, we were under the Alberta curriculum, and wherever there was Indigenous people under the Alberta curriculum, in the 90s, we learned complete English with one class of like French. So I joke with my family, je comprends petit peu les français, mais je serai vraiment Eskimo, like just joking, right? Like, and like we pick on each other because my brother was a little boy. He thought the word apple in French was pomme de lettre na ni matne rouge, because it was a whole song, and that's how he interpreted the sound. I'm like, no, the word for apple in French is pomme. And so we had quite a diverse upbringing, so I could validate that Inuvik and Norman Wells are completely beautiful communities, and I really enjoyed all the music. It was like accordion style music, lots of jigging, everyone smelled like smoked moose, and just hearing Inuvialuktun on the radio. This was my early childhood, and going through Yellowknife, the long highway. I forget what it's called, but we would take the long highway, do road trips through Inuvik, then make our way to Whitehorse. And I remember thinking, wow, this is still Inuk territory, because this is Inuvialuit territory. And we would see wild sheep out in the land. And I just thought, wow, we have such a diverse, beautiful culture. I'll also explain a little bit about my bloodline and why I feel it's so weird that I feel like I'm such a Nunavut child. I'm a Baffin Island resident, Qikiqtaaluk resident. My Inuktut is from Kivalliq region, southern part of Nunavut. But then my bloodline is from the Western Arctic, Cambridge Bay, Iqaluqtutiaq. My dad's Inuinnaq. But so my dad is half Inuinnaq. He's half Inuinnaq from his mom. And his dad grew up speaking Inuinnaqtun as well, but his dad is half Greenlandic and half Alaskan. And how that came about was there was an Alaskan Inupiaq man. He had a schooner where he traveled throughout Alaska, Herschel Island, Yukon, NWT, and then he ended up living in Joe Haven, and he ended up having children there and just living his life in Joe Haven. So when I traveled in these regions where my bloodline was from, I've developed a really diverse idea of what it means to be Inuk. And it doesn't just mean what you practice and the protocols you have. It also means the type of people we were before contact. And to think in our language, we have to think in a type of philosophy that's different from, say, settler Canada and even French Canadian. It's a very emotional language, it's a very concise language. When you say something, there's almost so much conviction, and it's a type of lens to put on when you think in the way that our ancestors think. For example, one of my favorite words would be akpik, and it's the same from Alaska, Yukon, NWT, Nunavut, Nunavik. I believe they even use it in Greenland. And Akpik, Aqpik, it doesn't just mean cloudberry. It doesn't just mean salmonberry. And it doesn't mean bake apple. It doesn't mean any of those. But to think in our language, Akpik means it stands out. It's bright. It's orange. It's Akpik. Like it's noticeable. So to think in our language is to think from a people where we appreciate others taking up space, and we acknowledge people for how they are. And it's a different lens from settler Canada or whatever we've been taught in school. And what I learned from language in the 90s, my childhood, it was English. And English, it's like you say everything in sentences, but Inuktut, it's so concise. It's a different way of thinking. It's so direct, and I'm excited to discuss this more and teach more about it. Yeah, it's so cool that we have people from everywhere on this, and that there's so many Nunavimmiu and Nunavimmiu and people from Nunavut. So I'm excited to learn if you guys have any vocabulary you want to add to this discussion, or if you'd like to correct me, or what it means in your dialect. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions so far, or?
I think we're good to go and ready to learn.
Yeah. Okay. What I like about our language is we have a lot of similar words, and the word for sleep is often Sinik, Sinik, and any language we have that stems from our ancestor, the S sound, si, su, sa, can also be replaced with he, hu, ha. So for my parents' dialect, when they're saying sleep, they would say hini, Hini. But what I also learned was in some areas of Nunavik, the H, he, hu, ha sound could also come from QI, QU, and QA. So for a lot of us, when we would say fish, Qikiqtaaluk, they would say ihalo. But for the most part, si, su, sa is interchangeable with he, hu, ha. Yeah, so like the word for, I like this especially because it's also Melo's name, the animal Qikiqtaaluk. It could also, like, it's also pronounced hik hik. And but it's funny that it was changed to hik hik, because we usually name animals by the sound they make, and they don't, the ground squirrel doesn't say hik hik. It's just funny to me. Yeah. Another thing with our language is the letter P. It could be changed with the sound B. So like the word Qablunaq, which means settler, could also, it's spelled with a B for most of the time because we pronounce it with a B, but B and P are interchangeable. Yeah, and same with all the vowels. Inuktitut is broken down into three major sounds with vowels. The first one being E, next one U, next one A. E sound mixed with U is ew. E with A is pronounced as ea. And then moving on to the U sound, U with A is ua. U with I is ui. Then moving on to the a, when that's mixed with A and I is I, A and U is ow. So there's so many ways you could mix the vowels. It's the same basic rule throughout a lot of the words. If you break down long words by vowel, then it's more manageable to pronounce these words. It doesn't matter how long the word is. Just if you just remember the rules of how to pronounce the vowels. And there's also, when you add in syllabics, when we add a dot to these words, it elongates the vowel sound. So a is a opposed to a, and the u, if we have two of them, it's u opposed to u, and I, e, it's e opposed to e. So if you just keep in mind the rules of our language to pronouncing the vowels, it becomes, like I said, it becomes more manageable to pronounce. There's a fewer words in our language that are harder to pronounce. That would be ngi, ngu, nga. Ngi is spelled N-G-I. Ngu is nga is spelled N-G-A. And the way you could remember how to pronounce this sound and know you're capable of it is in the English language when you say hanger or thing or thingy, like it's that ng sound. And we say it in the English language, so we're able to carry that skill into the Inuktut language. And it's just practicing these sounds if you have a hard time getting the hang of it. Another difficult sound would be Q, mainly because we don't say that. It's like an unconventional sound in the English language. Yeah, and I'm trying to think of it in other languages, but I can't. So I'll just say them anyway. So QI is Qi. And then the other one, QU, Qu. And then QA is Ka. So that includes words like the town Qikiqtaaluk, or the word fish, Qikiqtaaluk. It's just an unconventional sound for the English language. To me, it adds dramatic effect to how we feel when we want to say something. It could make our language sound a little bit angry, but we're just not. I don't know. It's just like one of those sounds, and it just adds depth to it for me. Another difficult sound from our language would be si, su, sa. Like I said, I can't think of it in any English word for whatever reason. I always this is just I'm smiling because I laugh to myself and I joke about how boring the English language is, only because I've been an Anglophone and I still consider myself an Anglophone. I was only able to pick up the language when I was 14, 16, and I just find English so plain and so boring, but Inuktitut makes things so much more fun. And yeah, they just don't have all the sounds we have. um, and when I think of the sound shishu sha, I think of the town Akviat. When someone who's Inuk from Akviat, they're unimpressed, they'll say "Eak shut," and that's like saying you or whatever. It's just like shut, eak shut, unak shut na. It's what I just really enjoy our language, how descriptive it is, and we have words that describe animals that are no longer existing. Like for the word mammoth, we have Kivalliq. That's spelled Killivva, Qikiqtaaluk. And we also have other mystical animals from our language, and I often don't think a lot of them are completely mystical. When we listen to elders' legends and they talk about the older legends, the legends discuss a time, an ecozone where it was more lush. There were sometimes trees in the legend. There's animals that burrow in the ground that have big horns. And I think these animals could have existed before the ice age, because the ice age took away a lot of the trees, a lot of the mountains. And when you tour throughout Whitehorse, they talk about the glaciers coming and making these mountains smaller, because they would have been the size that they are in BC, where they're gigantic mountains. So it's, our language could be up to 30,000 years old, and it's okay to think about these languages critically. You don't need to accept all the mystical animals. You don't need to accept all these beliefs and having to sacrifice yourself in a ceremony, or you know what I mean? Like you don't need to do these things today. You don't need to sacrifice. We have human rights. We were able to like exist today. Like it's not, we don't have the extreme lifestyle that our ancestors had, where they had to do sacrifices for survival. They had to keep in mind how much people were in camp. If everyone was contributing, if people weren't contributing, they would confront them. Like it was a very survivalist community, thriving people, where their life range wasn't as long as it is today. So I feel that's why they were extremely emotional, because they just knew their time was coming, and they were extremely spiritual. So that would contribute to our language. Our language, the way we think, is whole. We look at people as a whole person. Everyone is, they're made of components. We understand people have emotions. We understand there's a way of thinking. There's their mental health, their physical health, and their spiritual health. When we speak Inuktitut, we're discussing a lifestyle that still exists through us, that we could learn from our families, and we could learn from legends, or we could learn from workshops. But our language, when we listen to it, there's a literal translation, and there's also a philosophical meaning. Another word that I would like to talk about especially in this day and age where we're discussing mental health. Just because I was talking about whole, one of my favorite Inuktut words that I learned from, I consider her an elder. She's the professor in Saskatchewan, Carla Williamson. I asked her, how do we say holistic? How do we say holistic in our language, a whole person, a whole being? And she said, Inukta, Inukttaa. So that is, it means a whole person, like us, our physical body, but there's also a philosophical meaning to it where your emotions are valid, your spirit is valid, and your mental health is important. So when we're learning Inuktitut, think of the philosophical meanings as opposed to the literal translations, because it's keeping our culture alive and our values alive, and it's passing it down to the next generation. With the word Inukta, it made me think of another word for our spirit, and Inuinnaq, or Inuinnaq, Inuinnaq. Inuinnaq refers to our breath, the breath we take from our physical body. And the reason why that's a word in our vocabulary is because we believe in merit in breathing and that keeping us alive. So Inuinnaq is almost referring to like the spirit of our breath. Another word for spirit would be, it's something like Puvak, Puvak. I would have to double check. Don't quote me on that, but it's like the spirit. It's a bubble, and coming from our culture, our people being Inuk, that is really symbolic to us, the spirit being a bubble. Because the shamans, when the shamans would get mad at each other, some of them would try pop each other's bubble, because that was a way of killing their spirit, and then who knows where their spirit would go. That was the ultimate way of killing a person. You didn't just kill them in the physical world, you also killed their spirit, and you don't know where their spirit went. So it's just like, it gives you an idea of the psyche of our people, how deeply spiritual they were. I don't know how many decades and generations of people of meditating it took to inherit this knowledge and spirituality, but it gives you an idea of how deeply spiritual our ancestors were. When I think of whole, Inukta, the whole person, beyond the spirit, I also think of like I studied a year of mental health when I was 19 years old in Inuktut. It was like a pilot run diploma program that they had in like the early 2000s. It's not running anymore, but what I learned during that year I studied it was Inuit spirituality is, so we still carry these practices still today, like where we could be extremely like we have extreme what's it called, like taboos, well practice taboos, and we're, what's it called when a cat walks by and it makes us something, a black cat walks by?
Superstition?
Yeah, that kind. We're extremely superstitious, and like even like there was several ceremonies that my family was demanding I practice. Even during the pregnancy of my child, my mom wouldn't allow me to gather newborn baby clothes until she was born, because it would be an omen if I started collecting some stuff. So it's just like our culture's really whole, really spiritual, and we even have a word for karma. And we even use it in practical language, like utak. Utak means to return. It's spelled U-T-I-Q, utak. And when we're telling someone in the town Akviat, when we're telling someone if they did something to hurt us or wrong us, or they said something kind of mean, like an insult or something, like if they did something to us and we didn't appreciate it, we could say utak tiovu, which means karma's coming back to get you. And that's spelled U-T-I-U-V-U, utak tiovu. And to me, that's still like a valid superstitious thing to believe in. Karma, it's if you put good out in the world, then good will come back. That's what I really appreciate about learning our language, is that we're a really whole language. And even our creation stories, Nuliayo, the goddess of the sea, it gives you an idea of the way our ancestors thought and shaped the world. And it's also a sad legend where Nuliayuk was assaulted by her dad, where he cut off her fingers, and because he was so ashamed of his daughter marrying the wrong person or the wrong being, as opposed to marrying the hunter of his dreams, his own projections, or whatever. And he threw her over the kayak and cut her fingers. A lot of our creation stories, they show us that women are strong, and even if they become physically assaulted so bad, where like even their dads assaulting them, cutting off their fingers, that her spirit was so strong that she became the mother of all living things in the ocean. And in our culture, we do so many things to honor her for that. When we light a Qikiqtaaluk, the flame is almost we design it to be in a zigzag, and we honor that in our tattoos. We'll honor the zigzag. We'll put the zigzag on our fingers, or we'll put lines on our fingers. A lot of people believe that it's because we're in our way nodding our head down to Sedna for her experiences of having her fingers cut off. So there's people that believe the lines on the fingers honor our goddess Nuliayu. And the reason why I bring up our creation story is because I feel it's extremely relevant today as a global culture, where we span from Russia, Alaska, all throughout Canada and Greenland. It's important for us to identify ourselves as Inuk, and not under the umbrella term Indigenous, because we're more than just Indigenous within the realm of being in Pan-Indianism. We're Inuk, and we should be proud and withhold our culture, our spirituality, our emotions, everything. We should be able to take up enough space where we say, no, our creation stories are different. I say this all the time, I don't identify myself as an Inuk from Turtle Island, mostly because the Arctic does not have a single turtle. And it's just I'm often pressured to be this strong, spiritual Native woman that's covering up all my skin, that I'm drumming and I'm graceful and I'm connected to the creator, and that my only job is to give birth. As a woman, I say that to me that's pan-Indianism, and it's almost like converting me to Christianity, where I'm forced to take on these spiritual teachings that other indigenous people have. I say, no, I'm an Inuk woman, and I appreciate you guys having your culture, and I give you space to reclaim all your culture. But my ancestors had different creation stories, and here are their names, and here are their stories. I'm open to discussing the legends that I hear, but for me, I tell Inuit, listen to the creation stories wherever you go, and listen to the names of the creation stories, and listen to the philosophy, and try to find the humanity in the stories, and if there's a lesson in the story they're telling you, then take on that lesson, basically in thesis statement, where it's telling you how to resolve all your problems or a little problem.
Can I interrupt you for a minute?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I'm really glad for you saying that, we're always being labeled. Now we're being labeled as indigenous. Like, I don't consider myself indigenous either. Like, it's good to hear other Inuit saying, we're Inuit. I'm an Inuk. I'm not indigenous. It's just the government labeling us again, like we were called a long time ago natives. And we weren't even from the south.
True, yep.
Even though, like, I'm from the Inuktut region, we have lots of trees. And our neighbor in Quebec, they don't have any trees. We have really high mountains. That when you go to our mountains, you're going like this. Wow. And then your neck will be sore. Our Torngat Mountains.
Yeah.
Like our dialect, we write in Roman orthography.
Yeah.
Like, I know rest of the regions, like they use syllabics and Q's for K's, but we use two types of K's, like a big K for soft ha, and a small K for ka.
Wow. Yeah. I'm so happy that you added to this dialogue, because it's so true. What I really appreciate learning Nunatsiavut dialect, and what's amazing to me is learning that in the Eastern Arctic of Labrador, that the Nunatsiavumio had contact with Moravians, and the Moravians, I was told that they learned Inuktut from Greenland, and then they traveled to Labrador. So that's why the Roman orthography there has the big K and little k. I have a friend from Greenland. Her name is Angnayakak. It would be Q in Canadian Inuktut, but because they had Moravians there, it's spelled with a capital K at the end. And I'm so happy you mentioned that. That's
because when I lived in Nunatsiavut, I only knew my dialect. But when I moved to Goose Bay, and then when I moved here, when I started working for Tungasiving and Inuit, I start learning the Nunavut dialect. Now I know the difference. And I find when I'm here and hanging around people from Nunavut who's talking Inuktitut, I switch to Nunavut dialect.
Yeah.
I know there's lots of dialects in Nunavut, but I want to share a little story when I went to Nain a couple of years ago, where I learned so much Nunavut dialect. Here where I work, we hear Nunavut dialect all the time. And when I went home, I was talking in my dialect, Nunatsiavut dialect, and I switched to Nunavut dialect with some words, and I didn't realize I did that. And the Inuktitut speakers at home picked it up right away. They said, wow, you just switched from word to word, from Nunavut dialect to Nunatsiavut dialect, and it just happened by itself. And I caught myself and I started laughing. I said, wow, I just switched.
Yeah. We kind of have that in English terms where we call it like code switching, where we switch from one behavior to another. Like we'll be like, pretend I'm talking with my friends and I'm talking in slang, and then I see other people, then all of a sudden I'll say the same words, but I'm using professional words if I like see a boss or something, like just switching. I find I do that a lot too with Inuktitut speaking, because like I said, I'm from the Western Arctic. For the word work, in my dad's Inuinnaq, he would say Hanaya, Hanayaq, Hanayak. And in Akviat, I call Akviat like, the way I describe Akviat is I say it's in southern Nunavut near the border of Manitoba, because like to me it's so south, and it's so south you could even smell trees in the spring from Manitoba. It like, to me, I call it southern Nunavut. It smells so rich there. In Akviat, for work they say piliri, Piliri, piliri. And for Iqaluit, when they're saying work, they say Itqanayak. Itqanajaq. Itqanayak. So it's like when depending on who I'm speaking to, if I'm talking to someone from Tiiturumaviit region, Kivalliq region, or Qikiqtaaluk region, if I'm going to say I'm going to work in Inuktitut, I would say, if I'm saying it to my dad, I would say Hanayang Niak Tunga. If I'm saying it to someone from Akvat, Pilirin Niak Tunga. Or if I'm going to say it to someone from Baffin region, I would say Ipkanayang Niak Tunga. So it's like there's so many. We have a lot of similarities in root words, but then when it comes to post-contact words, that's when it switches different, and we'll have different ways of expressing things like work, watching TV, or like items like pools, or how we say swimming. So for basic Inuktitut, we have, for words that like sleep, it would be sini, S-I-N-I. For walk, it would be pisuk, P-I-S-U-K. Or in my parents' dialect, it would be pihuk. So if you're going to say, I'm going to walk, niak is the mid suffix that you would add to make it future tense. So I would say pisu niak tunga. Tunga means I or me. Pisung niak tunga. I'll spell that again. Pisung niak tunga. And like I said, when you're looking at the Inuit language, it looks really intimidating at first. And I could say that because I was an Anglophone. But if you break down each sound after the vowel, which is a simple rule that will always carry out through every single word, if you stop each sound after a vowel, then you're creating a beat, a syllable. Pi, su, nya, tu, nga. So it's based, pisung nyak tu nga is 5 beats, five syllables. But written, it looks really intimidating with lots of Q's and K's and G's and lots of vowels. Another word with the same layout would be Sini Niak Tunga, SINIKNIQTUNGA. So that basic rule of adding niak into the word makes it a future tense word. In the middle, you could also say qau, Q-A-U, or lau, L-A-U. So pisu lauk tunga, pisu qau yunga makes it a past tense word. So it means I just walked, or I was just walking. Pisu lauk tunga. Another layer to saying past tense words would be the syllable L-A-A-K, lak, and it means like recently, like within, I'd say like within the day, or even less, like within the hour. And that syllable, pisu lak tunga, lak, I noticed it in the Qikiqtaaluk region, in the Baffin region. My parents don't use L-A-A-K, pisulak, which I find interesting. But it's just something to keep in mind with the Inuktut language. And another suffix in the middle of the word referring to tense is you could just have, if you're just referring to someone else, you could just say like pisuktu, siniktu, they are sleeping, they are walking. Yeah, it's the layout of our language makes sentences turn into one word. And that's what makes our language really concise, very specific, and that's what makes our language interesting. And I was also talking about this with Paige. I said that I wanted this to be Inuk only because I really appreciate everyone having space to whatever they want to include into this dialogue. I appreciate everyone's feedback and experiences. All the experiences we've had to date as Inuks, it's valid. I asked for this group to be Inuk specific only because not to say that I dislike non-Inuit, it's not that at all. What I really love about Inuit reclaiming our language is that we also require not just learning the sounds of the language and each word and what it literally translates to. I feel when non-Inuit learn the language, they pick it up within instantly, really quick, without hesitation. It's like they went to university where they just, learned our language specifically. Like they're so immensely in it that they could pick it up easily. Whereas Inuit, we often have emotional baggage, or Inuktut triggers us because we're told that we're like, my experiences growing up, even if both of my parents are Inuk, I was told I wasn't Inuk enough. Because of my English accent, I was called Qikiqtaaluk, which to me is completely delusional because I'm clearly full Inuk. Like, I'm just, and even if I was mixed, like, it's not up to anyone to dictate whether I'm Inuk or not. Because in my heart, I know I'm Inuk, and no one could take that away from me, no matter my blood quantum. Same with my daughter, no matter how many cultures we have in our mix, in our blood, anyone, they're still honored of being Inuk. And I feel it's important that when we're learning our language, we feel safe from being attacked for not being Inuk enough or whatever. So if you have anything you want to say that helped you learn the Inuit language the fastest, and what curbed your anxiety, why, like, were you shy of mispronouncing words, or what were your insecurities, what were your strengths? And I just want to turn on a light, sorry.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Like in my region, we're losing our language, Inuktitut, but there's more and more young people wanting to learn now. But I think because there's like Halunangayuit in our region are half white, half Inuk, and we have a different name for settlers, but for Halunangayuit, well, they're starting to call themselves Inuk, but a lot of them are afraid to speak Inuktitut or learn a word because they're afraid they might pronounce it wrong, or they might be made fun of, and they're insecure about that. And it's just not in one of our communities, like it's in all of our region. Like, they're just afraid to be made fun of, because if you pronounce, let's say my mother's last maiden name was Qikiqtaaluk, and I think a lot of young people are afraid to make a mistake, and then they stop. They stop trying to pronounce it. They stop trying to learn. And I would like for them to get over that gap, because it's been there for generations.
The big one I found was really useful was, I have a good friend who's from South Bathurst region, and there was a while there, we've kind of, like, life has picked up and we've gotten busy, but there was a long time that we were doing like daily word swaps, different words from our dialects, and be like, oh, this is how I say this in my dialect, this is how I say it in another. And then, like, sometimes we would record ourselves, like, either on video or like on like Facebook. You can do little voice recordings and send it. And I think just like having someone that is like a really sort of safe place, I think, for that to sort of learn, and then also to be exchanging a little bit was really, really helpful. And I think that was the first time I started really feeling comfortable, I think, trying.
I think that we need to make our youth feel more comfortable. And once we start doing that, you know, once we say, okay, we want you to feel comfortable. If you want to learn Inuktitut, I can teach you, we can teach you. Don't be afraid if you say it wrong. We're not going to make fun of you. You know, just let us know what word you want to learn or what you want to learn. And don't be afraid to say it wrong, because if you say it wrong, we all learn from our mistakes, and you can start saying it correctly in any dialect.
Is there any guy that wants to add a male perspective, so that way we could kind of like make it not so fragmented, majority women like opening up and making space for their whole feelings and stuff? Could we offer a male perspective where they could also provide like a human experience to this Inuktut journey?
Well, in Kivalliq, speaking Inuktitut is very strong, but the problem we have up there is reading and writing in Inuktitut.
Wow, that's so valid, because I was discussing this with a Mi'kmaq man. He's going into medicine, and he's not an Anglophone. His language was Mi'kmaq first, and we were discussing that there's a fragment between people that English is their first language and Inuktitut is their first language. There's different ways of thinking. English speakers often feel that they're being minimized or discredited of being Inuk or not being able to speak Inuktitut good enough, and Mi'kmaq, or indigenous speakers where it's their first language, even Inuit speakers where it's their first language, they feel as though that they're offering as much as they could, but when it comes to writing, writing is also a settler like institution. Like, it's not in our people to write. Writing is like a form of contact we've inherited. So it's valid that writing should be kept exact and written good to keep the merit and the strength of the language to the precision that we want it to be, to keep it as long as we could and strong as we could, so that way it's written correctly. And I'm really happy, Billy, that you included your voice in this conversation. Sorry, my daughter's asking for a charger. I'll be right back.
I have a question for anyone. If they have any resources they can recommend to learn further, that would be amazing. Just in general.
Mm-hmm.
Where needs a block? Would you? No, it's okay.
I would say you should download Facebook so you can join the Inuktut Nunatsiavut government live sessions. If not, I know Jenna Broomfield is really good at like posting on Instagram. She'll practice for Instagram.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That night, which is fun.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, dusalanga.ca is a pretty helpful website. They also have recordings of how to pronounce some of the sounds, like the harder sounds. Tusalanga.ca, dusalanga.ca. That they have 4 different dialects. They're all Nunavut dialects, but it at least gives you a lot of the root words.
Mm-hmm.
And the most important thing is the pronunciation.
Mm-hmm.
Can be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of online resources, Inuktut is really good too. It used to be Ottawa Inuit Children's Center. Their website has a lot of good resources. And the periodic Inuktut Essentials book is very good. That's really good stuff. And I reference that all the time for a lot of stuff that we do with Tia.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter Annika, my youngest daughter, she's just turned 20. Her father is a Haluna from Toronto. I have 5 daughters, and 4 of my daughters couldn't speak Inuktitut because I didn't speak Inuktitut at the time, at that generation, at the time where I lived in Goose Bay. I didn't speak Inuktitut to them, and my last daughter, I promised I would just speak Inuktitut, so I taught him Inuktitut, and we did a dictionary together, Inuktitut dictionary in Labrador dialect, so you can always Google Inuktitut dictionary, Labrador Virtual Museum.
Wow.
So that's a dictionary that I helped make, and if you want to use that for Nunatsiavut dialect, it's all the words are there.
Wow, I'm so happy that you guys are providing resources with each other. This is very useful. For myself, because of my multiple identities, I find I'm really interested in all the languages. For Inuktun, I downloaded, I think it's called like the Eskimo Dictionary. It's from one of their university. It's like the Alaska University one. It's like PDF version. I ended up printing the whole dictionary when I was working for the government as a summer student because I felt like I had unlimited paper. I'm like, whatever, it's the government. But it was like 300 pages. I haven't come across Inuvialuktun dictionary, but I would be interested to find one. I'm sure there's some online, but there's also a Inuinnaq dictionary. It has lots of root words and practical language, some sentences. And for Nunavut dialect, there's several resources and there's several dictionaries. There's a dictionary that was made out of pond inlet. There's practical language from Qikiqtaaluk, as Brian said. What I really like about Qikiqtaaluk is I think they have full-time college courses to become fluent in the language, where you do it for 1 year of intense learning the language. And what they describe each course that you learn as like a new type of growth. So I think like the last course, I forget the name of it, but it's like describing being at a plateau where you reach the top and the best you could be. To me, it's symbolic how the Qikiqtaaluk Center designed their Inuit language setup. But another thing is sometimes these dictionaries usually have literal translations and not so much philosophical translations. And it's normal for us to have disagreements on the final definition of words because different dialects have different meanings, but at the end, it usually comes towards the same idea. Yeah, I'm happy you guys are sharing resources. If there's anything else, please keep adding to it.
I really appreciate that, Barb, because like there's so little out there, like you were saying, about the greater explanation of the idea and the concept behind the word, as opposed to the direct like English translation. Blandina actually at the Inuit Art Foundation and I were talking about this at one point, because we were trying to come up with a new term for a new program. I don't remember what the program was now, but she gave me the example of a couple of young Inuk that she knew who had taken because they weren't fluent, but they had taken the word that essentially meant the stone that held down the corners of a tent, and they thought that it would be really effective as meaning like something structural and foundational, and they wanted to create a program and use that term. And she said that what they didn't understand is that the elders interpreted it as a weight that's holding everyone back and holding everyone down, like something like a load to bear. And she was like, it had the opposite effect of what they thought it would mean conceptually. So you have to be really careful. Like luckily we have a very effective linguist on our board. So we run everything by her before we put any terms out there in order to avoid exactly that kind of a snafu.
Thanks. Yeah. To me, that comes back to Inuit being really superstitious towards karma, and like I remember it wasn't with language, but it was building kayaks for the town to display them in Iqaluit to promote the Inuk culture, but then elders said that it has to have an elder's blessing, so that way in the future it could avoid damage or graffiti or what's it called? Yeah, just damage from the future in the community, that it has to come from a good energy and from a good philosophy. And it's and I find we carry the same type of merit for Inuktitut words. We almost need to have like in a concise way of thinking of it and what's the philosophy behind it. And that's really important, I find, to Inuit and the Inuk culture. Yeah. I'm trying to think of other important words in our culture that separate us from other indigenous people and what make us unique within the realm of this global world we live in as Inuit.
Inuktut.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like the philosophy of being Inuk. I laugh at a lot of the plant terms, like the word akpik, like the English translation being cloudberry. I'm like, what a boring translation. Like, that's all you could think of when you saw it, was just a cloud. And then like in Labrador, they call them bake apple. I'm like, to you, it just reminds you of baking apples. And even the you could buy akpik jam at IKEA because it's in the same latitude as Nunavut or wherever Inuit are, where the akpiks are, but in like Sweden. So like they have a word for it, but it just looks so like I'm like to me Inuktitut is such a special language, and I love the philosophical meanings we have behind it. Another word we have that we often literally translate, ayong nang mat. The way that is spelled is
Like in Nunatsiavut dialect, bake apple, we call it apik, but Southern Labrador, Métis, they call it bake apple.
Yeah. Ayong nang mat. It's usually spelled as AJURNAMAT. Ayong nang mat. Ayok means unable to, or can't, or you can't do it. So ayong nang mat, it means, when you literally translate it, it means there's nothing you could do. But when you look at it from an Inuk lanza, Inuk way of thinking, holistically or in a more whole view, it means almost like so be it. Like where you accept the situation, there's nothing you could do about it, so you just let it go. And that philosophy, you could bring that into, say you're out on the land and you run out of gas, but you're way out on the land, there's nothing you could do about it. You say ayong nang mat. That's your way of calming yourself and telling yourself you're going to be fine. There's like, you can't do anything about it, so you just have to accept it. This philosophy, we also carry it on into, say, struggling with our mental health. Once we're diagnosed with, say, a mental illness, we have to accept it at some point that we are mentally ill and that we're going to need help with this ailment. And we say, ayong nang mat. There's nothing we can do about it. It would be easier to accept it. And it sounds like it's kind of discrediting and just so easy to say, but it's more than just a philosophy. It's almost like a way of life and a way of accepting your human experiences, your traumas, your good experiences, and just being able to live your best life. Before contact, Inuit, we believed in giving our children all the tools they could, all the resources within their own being, to have the conviction to believe that they could be a good sower, that they could cook, that they could hunt, that girls could hunt. We had huntresses, and that we could be able to provide for ourselves and give ourselves a good life. So with our language, it's not just, it could be more than just literal translations, but it also has deeper meanings, and it gives you an idea as to how Inuit used to carry out their lives before contact. Does anyone have anything they want to add to the word ayong nang mat?
I don't have anything to add to it, but I have a question regarding I noticed a lot of elders and a lot of traditional speakers, and you know what I mean by traditional speakers,
Mm-hmm.
like they learned from traditional speakers as opposed to newer Inuktitut.
Mm-hmm.
Their finals are different from how elders use finals, and I noticed that you did it like you speak a more older Inuktitut, and I'm guessing it's probably because you learned in Agvet.
Mm-hmm.
And it was when you were saying Pisungnyaktunga as opposed to Pisuknyaktunga.
Mm-hmm.
So when you spell it out, it would be Pisuniaq,
Yeah.
and as opposed to Pisungniaq, because when you pronounce it, you're saying Pisungnyaktunga.
Mm-hmm.
And like the way I grew up, because my parents are in their 70s, when we say no, we say now instead of nauk.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I've come across readings, I can't remember where they said that at some point Inuit decided that our finals were going to end in a K, a T, and I can't remember what the other ones are. But elders usually end it in an NG sound.
Mm-hmm.
And I notice when you speak with a lot of that NG sound. And I'm just wondering what you make of that difference. Especially because it doesn't show up in our writing.
Yeah, sometimes when I'm joking and writing in our language, I'll add extra NG, and I'll be like NG, and then, or like R, or lots of N's, or lots of R, K for the Q sound. Like, that's just my joke at my parents, because they're from the Western Arctic, where there's a final sound. Final sounds is after the vowels, where there's NG, K, like just one single consonant. Is that what we call it in English? Consonant? Yeah. I'm like, kind of sounds like continent, but I know it's not continent. You little cues for sounds. And okay, so my parents, their dialect, they add extra to the maximum as they could finals after every vowel. Like when you look, like even on my screen name, my name Qikiqtaaluk, like most people would drop the L, the first L. They would have gone without it. It would have been Pavialok. Or it would have ended at the O instead of having a K. It would have been Pavialu. But of course, my parents from the Western Arctic had to add as much extreme extra as they could. So it's Pavialuk Akoak. And I think that comes from it being an older form of the language, but I also think it also comes from just the regional variation of the language, not to sound like I'm growing any lateral violence towards the Baffin region, but I feel like the Baffin region, the Qikiqtaaluk region, is almost the monopoly of making the dictionaries of Inuktitut. And it's come to the point where we often call Inuktut language. Inuktut circumscribes all the dialects from Russia, Alaska, Yukon, NWT, Nunavut, Nunatsiavut, Nunavik, and Greenland. Inuktut circumscribes all of these languages, even Siberia, whereas Inuktitut is located mostly in Nunavut. And it's not to say that I dislike it, but I feel like Baffin region is almost in the lead of standardization of the language. ITK, our national Inuit organization, they're pushing towards having Inuktitut standardized somehow into one whole language nationally. I'm just like, good luck to them. I feel like Inuit are gonna put a big fight up for that. I don't know if it will happen or if it's going to be easily adopted, or if Inuit across Nunavut are gonna be defiant and have strength in wanting to have only one language. Who knows? It's like, it's a political area where it could cascade and go anywhere in any direction. But when it comes to our language, I feel we should have, because of our different ecozones and how diverse our lands are, I think it's important to have our own dialects. But I noticed in my parents' dialect, they have lots of extra final sounds. My mom, who's from Tiiturumaviit, Nunavut, when we moved to Akviat, she would speak Inuktitut to them and she picked up the language really quick. And they also easily understood my mom's dialect, even if she was from the Qikiqtaaluk region of Nunavut. The reason is because I feel there's an ancient route between Cambridge Bay and the Rankin Inlet of that area. And the reason why I know there's evidence of this ancient connection is because when I went to the Winnipeg Art Gallery in 2017, I met this older woman, Helen, from Rankin Inlet. She was half Rankin Inlet mute and half Inuinnaq, because of that ancient connection, that ancient root we have. Believe it or not, a lot of our people had ancient trails where it was easy to travel. And there's even a region between Labrador, Nunavik, and Nunavut where all three regions meet and even all the water meets, and where the language is very connected and very similar, all three regions. And a lot of people could trace their ancestry to that one spot. And there's also Inuit that go from Qikiqtaaluk, Greenland, on the ice to Ellesmere Island to hunt seasonally for muskox, and it's in their treaty rights to go from Greenland to Canada to back to Greenland and hunt these muskox. And that's also why I'm part Greenlandic and part Alaskan, because Qikiqtaaluk was able to travel from Alaska to Joe Haven just by sailing. He met his wife, who was adopted from Greenland to Inuvialuit territory. She grew up as if she was Inuvialuq, and she had clothing as if she was Inuvialuq, but genetically she was adopted from Greenland. And this was 1, 2, 3 generations ago. So I'm not surprised in the similarities, and I'm not surprised in the differences of our dialects at all. And when I speak to older women from Greenland, I do a lot of artwork across Canada. Being an artist is my trait or whatever, employment. I guess that's what it's called. I don't know. That's how I make money. I guess that's what you call it. I don't do it 9 to 5, so that's why I'm just like, I guess. Like,
Just want to say that Inuktitut is no longer called Labrador. It's called Inuktitut. We became a self-government. So any community from Nain to Rigolet is called Inuktitut. From south there is Labrador.
Yeah. It's interesting to me to see my Inuinnaq dialect have same language and words as some areas of Greenland. I have I call her auntie, but she's not even that. She's like my grandpa's her uncle, so she's like my aunt, but like elder aunt. I don't know, we have different ways of calling family in Inuit life, but she's my aunt, and she's able to travel through Greenland. She'll try use her Iqaluit dialect to speak to these people from Greenland, and they don't have a clue what she's saying. So then like she's so talented, she could switch from Inuktut to Inuinnaq, and all of a sudden they're conversing in clear language. So there's once you learn a dialect, you're also learning not only that community, but the communities that they historically before contact used to trade with. So when you're learning even dialects in Iqaluit, you're not only learning Iqaluit dialect, you're able to carry those skills and suffixes to even Nunavik. I find Iqaluit has a lot of same Inuktitut as northern Quebec. And even within the realm of northern Quebec, there's several dialects and several philosophies and ways of thinking. Yeah, is there anything anyone else wants to add to that, or? Wow.
I found this really informative, and it's always really nice, especially because I'm living here in Fredericton so far from other Inuit. I often end up feeling pretty disconnected. It's hard to, I mean, like, we're friends on Facebook. You see my struggle with my Inuktitut with my toddler. So when I hear other Inuit speaking about their relationship with their Inuk identity, it makes me feel that I'm all the way here in Fredericton, I'm not alone. So I really want to thank you for doing this tonight.
Yeah, I really like having this discussion with people from all over, because in Toronto, like, our Inuit, they're not just from a certain region, they're from everywhere. Like, we have Emily from Greenland and people from all the regions. I'm sure there are some Alaskan Inuit as well. So it's really, really nice to hear everyone's experiences.
It actually amazes me and gives me a lot of hope when I see young adults and adults saying that they just learned Inuktitut and they picked it up and became very good. I went to live in Tiiturumaviit, and the youth are very shy there. So it wasn't like when my siblings went back to live in Selrit and they came back pretty fluent, even though they say, oh, it's not so good. I know it's pretty good. It's better than what I do with Inuktitut. But yeah, it makes me happy to know that at any time, like, it's hard if you're a student in the South because you can't have your education and be in Nunavik. If I could have my education and be in Nunavik, that would be my life. I wish it were my life. but I have to be here. And I can only pick so much. When I'm in Nunavik, at some point when it's been a few weeks, I start not thinking in Inuktut, obviously, but I can pick it up very quickly. I can read it very quickly. But the more I spend time in Montreal, the harder it is to find community members to talk with and things like that. But all that to say, Nakukmi gives me hope.
Really glad to hear your perspective, Christine.
Great, Christine. I'm happy you're learning. Keep it up.
My best teacher is my niece.
Oh. Keep going, Christine.
Yeah. Don't ever stop wanting to learn, and don't ever give up. And even if there's people that bully you for not knowing your language, or if they laugh at you for mispronouncing, it's a part of the journey. And it's almost like, it's kind of like, I find it's a really emotional journey learning the language, because you're breaking barriers of colonialism. You're breaking the English way of thinking. You're breaking the institutionalization of the settler life. And it's so beautiful reclaiming your Inukness, and everyone should be proud of being Inuk, and know in your heart that you're Inuk, and that you don't need to prove it to anyone, and your level of language doesn't validate or invalidate your Inukness, because you know it's always there, and you know in your heart you are. And I hope everyone feels that they belong in our culture, and I hope everyone feels that they could grow love and have a good identity in our culture. And I want everyone to know that sometimes you're your biggest barrier in learning, and you have to just not care what anyone thinks when you make a mistake, and you have to just believe in yourself. And if you keep dreaming that you're gonna be fluent, it's going to happen. And just keep believing. And I feel the same way, because I'm in university in Halifax right now. I'm going on my second year in Southern Canada, and I'm feeling super homesick. I'm stuck down here because of the coronavirus. I don't want to be an accidental carrier of coronavirus, and then go to my home community and accidentally be the omen that brought it to Nunavut, where the cases were 0, then all of a sudden it's thousands. I didn't want to be that person. These are all my irrational fears and like spectrum of anxiety thinking, but it's totally valid to how I am, and I accept it. But I didn't want to be that omen person. So I thought, okay, I could sacrifice a summer of going to the beach and going to the ocean almost every single day. I could sacrifice having dried meat over going to the beach and having lobster. That's okay. I decided that. But I totally understand, the longer you're away from Inuit land, Inuit community, Inuit territory, Inuit people, it does feel like like there's a ticking time bomb, or like your time is running out. It feels like you're grieving for your culture, and it feels like you're aching, and nothing could ever fill that void. And on top of that, you're sweating because you're in Southern Canada. So it's just like you're emotional and sweating, and it's just like, why? I know that pain. I know it's so hard. And it feels like you're just waiting for your family to die in the Arctic, and it feels like you're just waiting for elders to die while you're away. And it feels like you're being selfish for going down to Southern Canada, sacrificing the Inuk way of life to institutionalize yourself, to get an education. I totally know how it feels to wake up at 6 a.m. and just want to be home in the Arctic with your family, speaking your language, being super chill, the days are slow, and I could totally validate that. It is a grieving, sad feeling where you just miss being around Inuit. But there's resources, and you're strong enough to learn the language. Even if you're in southern Canada, away from Inuit territory, there's resources, and I hope that all of you find all the resources you need, and I hope you find the good people that will help you promote you learning the Inuk language, because I feel if you want to learn the language, you deserve to learn the language. I remember how it feels, just aching and wanting so badly to learn how to speak Inuktitut, and I remember aching and aching. I was a teenager in grade 7 in Akviad, and people would be conversing, having conversations with each other, and I remember just aching, wishing I could join them, and just feeling left out, like feeling left out with them, without them trying to make you feel left out, but you just feel left out because you don't have the skill of being able to speak it. I know that feeling, and it goes away the more you learn. That feeling goes away. You cure it yourself the more you learn, and you cure your aching wish to learn by feeding yourself the knowledge and just ignoring anyone that impedes your learning experience. Because no matter how old you are right now in 2020, who knows how long else you're going to live? That could be 20, 30, 40 years. That's 40 years of you learning a skill, a language. You have the rest of your life to learn this, and don't bully yourself for however old you are in learning today or learning the language slowly, because you have the remainder of your life to do it. So just keep practicing and always keep believing in yourself, and just remember in your heart you're Inuk, and no one could take that away from you. Even if they're trying to hurt you for your level of language, just know that it's your journey and it doesn't matter. Our collective experience of our language being taken away is a common experience that roots to residential school or contact from the police. I understand Inuinnaq is not spoken in Cambridge Bay because people that are my grandparents' age were beat up by the RCMP when they were speaking their language. So today there's still people that have lash marks all over their body at the arms of police by the RCMP in my grandparents' generation in the Western Arctic. And because of experiences like that, they're unable to speak the language. And when we're reclaiming our language, we're really combating colonialism, and we're reclaiming a piece of our mind. We're reclaiming our healthy emotions, and we're reclaiming our spirit of being Inuk, and we're reclaiming our body. We're reclaiming ourselves, and we should appreciate ourselves no matter our level of language.
Yay! I might stop recording now, and I was wondering if we could take a photo.
Yeah.
Before anybody else leaves. So